Welcome to Living Fully. Each episode is a chance to talk about mental health in a way that's simple, honest, and helpful. We'll share stories, tips, and tools to help you feel supported and feel your best. I'm your host, Catherine Hertig. In today's episode, I talk with counselors AJ Manning and Nicole Ward about helping kids handle big emotions. We're going to discuss simple ways parents can help their kids, like co-regulating during tough moments, modeling calming strategies, and giving children language for their feelings. After the episode, head to our website. We'll link it in the show notes. We've put together a bunch of free resources to help your kids. We've got a breathing exercise handout, tips to help your child manage their emotions, and more. We're talking all about kids. They have big feelings and sometimes they don't know how to express them, talk about them, deal with them. So I am here with a couple of counselors. Nicole Ward, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
And Jacqueline AJ Manning. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
So both of you are fairly new to the podcast. Can you tell our listeners a bit about yourselves?
Yeah, I'm coming up on 3 years here at the center, and I've done one prior podcast, which was also actually about kids and anxiety. But before being here, I've been in the fields for about 18 years. So I'm to be a veteran now, doing the similar type of work, especially with kids, actually, too.
Okay.
My history is focused around working with children.
Yeah. And I'm coming up to a year here at the Calgary Counselling Center. But as Nicole mentioned, I've been working in nonprofit and government, specializing with intervention with kids. So that has been the bulk of my work as well. Yeah. So yeah, I'm coming about 23 plus years now, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
excellent. Well, I'm excited to pick your brains. So let's start with something that a lot of parents can relate to. You know, kids have big feelings. What do we kind of mean when we say that and helping them with those quote unquote big feelings?
Yeah, I think it's not different from adults. Obviously, the approach is different. But when it comes to managing those big emotions, we're looking at, I think first maybe looking at the connection between the brain and the body and having kids identify those connections.
Okay.
And then also sometimes with adults and again and kids, they feel powerless to manage those big emotions.
The kids do?
Yeah. So really validating the feelings around that and saying, you know, this is, and normalizing the feeling that this is really big and I feel overwhelmed right now.
Right.
And getting down to the kids' level and kind of being in it with them, I think is step one.
yeah, and as Nicole's mentioning too, like it's when we talk about the brain, specifically kids, I mean, their emotional brains they're quite wired in a way to maximize like a sense of impact. And at the same time, their cognitive brains are still not fully developed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So there's a lot of things happening there, whether it's for the automatic response and the prefrontal cortex, that part's still developing. And in terms of that, it becomes really hard for them to make sense of it, right?
For sure.
Sometimes it's around what is this? And as Nicole was talking about, like that connection, like they may start feeling things in their body, but it's not making sense to some of the thoughts that are taking place or what to do with some of those feelings that are happening.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it can also be around the emotion itself being displaced. So for example,
what does that mean?
Let's say, you know, a kiddo goes to school and deals with bullying, for example. And so there's all this anger and frustration built into the child. The child comes home and mom may ask, you know, can you put your phone away or can you go do this chore? And the child blows up and starts screaming and yelling.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So there would be an example of displaced emotion because it's like drawn from somewhere else and still hasn't been processed. Right.
Yeah.
So so those are kind of two examples where big emotions take place. And what often we see with that is the behavior part, right? The behavior as in, well, that's not appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. Or in some cases, oh, you're just trying to get yourself out of doing chores, right? You know, and so then what ends up happening there is the message gets delivered to the child as it's your big feelings don't matter.
Or it's not okay to feel that way.
It's not okay to feel that way. We're not going to validate how you feel,
Yeah.
right? I mean, some of the things that have happened over the years, like, raise your kid tough, right? They scrape and it's like, oh, that's not a big boo-boo. You'll be fine,
Yeah,
right?
just suck it up. Yeah.
But really, as Nicole was saying, validation, right? Like, that's a big deal to a 3-year-old. Sure, that pain might seem like it's not a big deal to us. It's just a scrape, but that's a big deal to the 3-year-old.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's like, no, I want you to know this is a big feeling for me right now.
Yeah, I know. Thinking like my own experiences, it's like you look at a kid and they're crying about something and you're like, well, I've gone through so much worse. You don't need to be this upset. But they only have their limited amount of experiences. So yeah, their feeling is probably pretty, I don't know, what's the word? Appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, emotionally, right? That's
Yeah.
where they're at. And cognitively, they're still developing.
Yeah.
So that connection is not making sense at that moment. It's that moment where it's like, this hurts. I don't like this.
Yeah.
And this is how the best I can do to express it.
For sure.
Well, and if they're dismissed, that may lead to further frustration and more
Exactly.
emotions, more big feelings.
So we've kind of touched on this, but we are going to go at this very generally because there's going to be a million different situations or reasons why kids could be having intense feelings. So yeah, sometimes it might be difficult to kind of pinpoint specifics, but hopefully we can look at this all, in the big picture. But yeah, so why do kids sometimes have those outbursts, those intense emotional reactions to what, we might consider things that aren't a big deal? And what is going on for them in those moments? Like what's going on in their brains and their bodies, like you were talking about?
I think when it comes to the brain, as humans, we have what's called a stress response. And that's what you might more commonly hear when your fight, flight, freeze response turns on, then you have a reaction, a big one usually, because the function of that is to help you save your own life if something really bad is happening. The problem is sometimes that gets triggered when there's not a major disaster happening, but you're processing it as if it is. So when that goes on, you have very few tricks up your sleeve to manage, and often the result is a big feeling or a total separation from your feelings, which would look more like freeze or just kind of numbing out.
Yeah.
So kids can have those reactions multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And as we get older, we hopefully learn to put things in perspective and recognize what are the triggers to that stress response for us and find ways to walk ourselves out of it. But kids really need some
guidance around that.
pretty intense help with that in the beginning.
Yeah, for parents or caregivers who are just starting to think about this or, starting to recognize these big feelings in their kids, how can they, begin teaching their kid to recognize and name their emotions, deal with these big feelings, that kind of thing?
There's many strategies to teach. I think what's really important is to make sure that when we are responding to excessive emotions, that it's being done in a caring and empathetic way. This really requires parents, caregivers, even professionals to be patient.
Yeah.
Right? There is this level of patience and understanding that, and as Nicole had mentioned, like the emotions are taking place, but that cognitive ability to understand it and manage it is still developing, right? And so many of us start to think that we just need to teach our kids with the expectation to regulate. We already set the bar, like, get over it. Oh, just go cry it out, right?
Yeah,
like,
calm down.
Calm down, right? But the truth is, they may not be at a place to manage that, right? Because this is where that cognitive development piece is still growing, still developing. So what do you do with that? Especially for young kids, this first step is taking that role in helping with co-regulation.
And young kids, like, what would be an age range we're talking about here?
Well, let's start at around the age of 3, right? I think textbook most people understand the importance of nurturing and caring, right, up to that age. And then once they start to become exercise some of their independence, then it's like, where along the lines do I start enforcing discipline, redirecting, those kind of things, right? And what's important is that is the starting point, if not early. And every kid develops differently, right? Some may be more advanced in their development cognitionally. Some may be a little bit slower, right? And that doesn't mean outcome wise that if they're developing a little bit slower in that sense, that it's going to impact them for the rest of their life.
Of course.
It's just they're at that stage in their development, right? And so part of that is really looking at when they are struggling to regulate and understand the emotion that's taking place in that moment, what can you as the caregiver do to help them get through that, right? For example, the difference between teaching self-regulation versus co-regulation would be self-regulation was like, okay, you need to go to your calm down bucket, and I can talk about that later.
Okay, calm down bucket.
Yeah, calm down toolbox or bucket, right?
Yeah.
But that would be an example of teaching or prompting self-regulation, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Or giving the child the cue to, okay, this is what you need to do, right? The co-regulation could be a little bit more around, okay, I see that you're having a really hard time with this. Let's do a breathing exercise together, right? Let's practice rainbow breathing. I can talk about that too.
Gotta write these down.
Yeah, rainbow breathing, and then both the caregiver and the parent engage in the breathing exercise together.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess it would really be dependent on the kid, right? On what kind of works for them.
And thanks for bringing that up, because as I mentioned even previously, just when we say 3 years old, a 3-year-old or 5-year-old, even a 9-year-old, every child can be at a different stage in their development, cognitionally, even emotionally in that sense. And trauma, I mean, we haven't really talked a lot about trauma, but how trauma can even impact that as well.
Of course.
Right? And delay the progress in being able to manage emotions, right?
Both of you have mentioned the concept of validation. So practically, what does that look like? Could you give an example of validating just what would look like for a parent?
Yeah, I think it's like what AJ said. I can see you're really this right now.
Yeah.
On their level, eye contact. I can understand why you feel that way. It's really important to you that you get to play with that toy that other child has right now.
Yeah.
And then kind of offering another solution. Like, what about if you could play with this other toy that you really liked last week, and then we can wait till that toy is available. The other piece, I think, is step one, and AJ did an excellent job of explaining it. But before co-regulation can happen, we need a parent who is regulated. So really taking care of yourself and learning those strategies about how to regulate your own emotions, because there's so much attached to that for parents. Parents get embarrassed when their kid is throwing themselves on the floor in the middle of, preschool, or having a big reaction in the mall. So it's being able to kind of tune into yourself and see what's going on for you and seeing what's coming up for you pretty quickly, and then working with your kids around doing that validation piece. So
there's no doubt. You often hear in the mix in therapy, anxious children, anxious parents, or anxious parents, anxious children, right? And so what are sometimes the steps that the parent may be taking or the caregiver be taking? And thanks for bringing that up, Nicole, because it's true, right? Like, often a lot of people think if you have a child who's having behavioral challenges, anxiety challenges, the first is like, let's put them in therapy, and and they can handle, they'll get better through therapy. But if they work with the counselor on those things and then go back home, and we're dealing with a household that has a lot of anxiousness, that creates a lot of anxiousness and stuff like that, then there may not be much progress and in the counseling support for the child, right?
In those situations, like when we say, if a parent's anxious, their kid's more likely to be anxious, is it because they're seeing those behaviors modeled? They're seeing that response to situations modeled?
Absolutely. Modeling is a big part, right? But I mean, there is even just the somatics, someone being in a stressful situation and how they respond to that, right? Let's be honest, parenting didn't come with a textbook. We take from research, we learn as we go, right? We do the best that we can, right?
So in the moment, when a kid is overwhelmed by big feelings, anger, sadness, frustration, what's the most helpful thing that an adult can do in that moment?
I think step one for me would be validate the feeling,
Okay.
right? Tune in to the kid. Like we said, get down on their level. Somewhere in there, check in with yourself, right? Like we've
How am
also
I doing
said,
with this? Yeah.
Yeah. Even if the reaction feels incongruent, that makes sense from a developmental perspective. So it's something that's not big in your world, like AJ said, can be big in a kid's world. So
Yeah.
So I think validation. What do you think, AJ?
Oh yeah, the validation, but in addition to that, like making sure it's caring and empathetic, right? That's the most important.
Yeah.
So it's that it gets validated, not just in a sense of, oh yeah, I can see you're sad. It's like having that empathetic approach. I'm like, I can see this is really sad for you. You must feel you're feeling really sad, right?
Yeah.
It's really important to be helping children name their emotions. And part of that is being able to help recognize and define how they are feeling in those moments. Because remember, as we
Right,
talked
yeah.
before, the emotional is not aligned with the cognition, right? And where they may be in their development. And so you can help teach these emotions by just even saying things like, you look sad right now, or I can tell you're mad, right? Naming those emotions, are really helpful for them to hear it and then make connection to what that feeling or what that experience they are having. When we do therapy, we connect. I mean, let's be concrete on one thing. Negative imaging triggers negative emotions. Positive imaging triggers positive emotions, right?
Okay.
So if there is in these moments feelings of something that's very negative and there's negative emotions surfacing, how they respond to it is important, right? It's being able to build that emotional bank to help them gain a little more knowledge and understanding of what's happening in that moment so that the next time it becomes more of a positive experience, right? And then it triggers more positive emotions like a growth. Right. And independence. Right?
Yeah. Like the next time something comes up, it's like, oh, okay, I know that I can recognize this as frustration. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, recognize and then feel some accomplishment to it, right? Being able to manage it. So then the next time it happens, there's a little more confidence built.
Right.
And then that triggers good feelings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which can encourage more growth.
For
right?
sure. And besides that, those validations, are there other kind of some everyday moments that parents can kind of bring into conversations about emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we call those teachable moments, and I love them. Sometimes when I have a feeling, like say we're parked outside the school and I see a kid that is about to run out in front of a car, and I get frightened. When my child is regulated, it's a good time for me to acknowledge that I have feelings and I get scared sometimes and I feel anxious sometimes.
Yeah.
And really have that conversation. Again, key pieces when the child is regulated. Again, too, I think if you're able to point out times when they handle the situation really well, then they can start to connect with the how they did that. How did they manage that? What did you tell yourself when you really wanted to go get a Slurpee after school and mom said no? You handled that really well. And what were the pieces to that? What did you do inside yourself to manage that feeling of disappointment a little better this time?
kind of a selfish question here. Is there a certain point where these kind of strategies aren't as effective? I'm wondering because, I mean, all this conversation, it reminds me of really a conversation I had yesterday with my 14-year-old stepson. And, you know, I was really trying to basically do what you guys are saying is, you know, he's really frustrated about a situation. And I really tried to listen to him like, I know this sucks. And trying to like explain why we're making a certain decision. Are messages like that still getting through in later years, in teenage years, or?
I think probably they're getting through more so. Just like adults, I think we're on a spectrum, and some of us need time away. Like if I were to have a conversation with my husband that was a little bit difficult, he would need time to process. I would be more likely to want to process more in the moment, but I have to recognize I do that for work with people. So I have some other skills around that. So I think it's you're the expert on your child. And when we talk about what counseling looks like with children, we'll talk about it, but you're the expert. So you kind of know if your kid needs some time to chew on it. My oldest needs time to chew on it. My youngest, like the best we're going to get is in that moment, probably.
Right.
So like it depends on the kid. But also identifying that you may not understand our rationale right now. Once you get to the point where you've normalized, validated like all the pieces, that someday you might. This is one of those times where we love you and we want you to be safe, and so this is the decision we've made as parents. It's hard. It's a hard one.
It's really hard because it's like it's one of those situations where it's like, hey, we know what's best. We know that in a few like years down the road, you're going to look back and understand and appreciate. But in this moment, for him, it feels like the worst thing in the world. And it's so hard to like, can't I just convince you that this is okay? Yeah.
Sometimes you can externalize it to them. Like, say, what if your friend Jake told you the same thing and their mom was saying that? They may be able to remove a bit of the emotional reaction and responsiveness to it and recognize that for Jake, that might be okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and I think it brings forward to like a moment to kind of identify, because 14 is teen, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about children and we're talking about teens, there is a whole different stage of development merging, right? And so their voice, it's very important for their voice to be heard. So I think a good reflective question on the caregiver side is, am I doing everything to make sure this kiddo is being heard, right? Does he feel that he's being heard? Have I asked his opinion and thoughts to the situation? Being able to include them more is really valuable. Yeah. As well as empowering them with information, because they're in a place right now where they're learning. There's so much going on. Things are moving so quickly. I always encourage every parent to watch Inside Out 2. Because that explains that the emerging teenager right there at 14, right? The emotions are going, things are all happening, right? We even know, even research has shown that between the ages of 14 and 16, because so many changes are happening in the body, their natural melatonin isn't even being released until 1 a.m. So then what ends up happening is this is why they're staying up so late, right? Yeah. And then they're having to get up to go to school in the morning. I bring this up because we all know what it's like to deal with sleep deprivation too, right? And then how that makes us irritable. So when we are having teens who are struggling to understand the rationale to consequences, boundaries, things like that, it's really good to try to empower them with as much information to what is happening, why the decision's being made, as well as asking their input. What do you feel would be fair in this situation?
Yeah. I know, because that's the thing, right? It's like you're at that age, you want a bit more independence, you want more control, but all these decisions are still being made for you.
Well, and I think one of the most common issues I hear about is the impact of screen time and how do you manage that, right, with teens. I love how the teaching family model is a great model that's used in a lot of significant intervention for kids. Some of their philosophy is really helpful in terms of understanding around the difference between basic skills and advanced skills. And basic skills are things like following instructions, right? If you were to break up following instructions, what would those steps be? It's looking at the person, saying, okay, completing the task, checking back. But in order for someone to be able to take initiative, they have to have the knowledge and understanding of how to follow instructions. So that's a really good question when you're dealing with teenagers. Are they able to follow instructions, and are they ready to take initiative? And a good way of practicing taking initiative is, all right, if the screen time cutoff is 9 o'clock, if you set it up that if your child takes initiative, turning off the social media at 8:30 and provide an incentive for doing that, and the child or the teen does it, then that's a major progress, right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
starting
awesome.
to exercise the skill of taking initiative, which is what you want to be teaching your teens as they transition to adulthood.
So you talked about helping kids name emotions, understand when they're feeling certain emotions. Are there any, tools or activities that you recommend that either parents use or that you use in counseling to kind of help kids build their emotional vocabulary?
Well, one of my favorites for at home, anybody can do it, is you can go to purchase the Candyland game. And then what you can do is you can do a legend of colors that align with the Candyland game. So yellow, purple, blue, orange. I don't remember the green, I guess. And then you can put beside each of those colors like happy, sad, angry. I would avoid using anxious. I would encourage using worried and being able to identify like an emotion. And so when you're playing the game with your kiddo, when you land, you have to share a time that you felt happy or a time you felt sad. That is a really good game to have a conversation going, talking about finding out what's happening at school when they're feeling angry or sad. It gives even the caregiver an opportunity to, ask those provoking pieces. Like, if you are worried that your child is, coming home sad, was there ever a time when you were at school that made you feel really sad? Because now it's on the board, right? And then one of the things to think about is that if they're not feeling comfortable yet to share, then that's a great opportunity for the modeling, right? So here comes the caregiver saying, you know what? I remember a time when I went to school. I felt really sad because none of the girls wanted to play with me, or they didn't want to invite me for lunch, right? And so when you use some examples like that, then there may be a hook that the child connects with. Like, whoa, yeah, that happened to me too, Mom.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, really? Tell me, what did you do? Or how, what did that make you feel like, right? So the Candyland game is great. Another one that I like to do is I really encourage families, like it's kind of like you can put like little Hershey Kisses in a tissue and then wrap it up and just put a ribbon around it. And then on there, you can use the same thing. Tell me of a time that you were feeling really happy when, we were camping or a time that just even general, if that was the case. And then you take another tissue and you wrap it again with another tag. And you can do it about 7-10 times, right? So then what ends up happening is as you guys are like a families together, they pass it to each other. And so then they have to unwrap it, pass it, and they have to share, and they pass it. And then in the end, the reward is everybody gets a little Hershey Kisses to share, right? So it becomes a little fun, positive reinforcement for everyone during a family time. So those are two of my favorites for in the family.
I haven't heard of either of those, so that's amazing. Tell us about rainbow breathing.
Oh, rainbow breathing. Yeah, rainbow breathing is like a DBT tool, just like with box breathing. And so when you picture around every color of the rainbow, you're thinking about breathing in and breathing out from the start to the end of the rainbow.
So does it help to have a picture of a rainbow in front of you when you're doing this?
It's more around using your hands.
Okay.
Right? So that's what makes it more fun for kids. Because actually the rainbow breathing is something that we've even done with adults.
Yeah.
Right? And it's giving them the visual of the color of each color that they're breathing in and out. But for kids, it's like taking their hands on their side and then breathing in and raising their hands up and then holding it for 4 and then breathing out. So that's one of their favorite things in because it's interactive, right?
Yeah.
And now it's even being able to engage and give them something to like movement, right, while they're focusing on the breathing.
Yeah, I think those are great suggestions that AJ had. When it comes to understanding the stress response, like we talked about earlier, a lot of purpose of having those tools is to turn back on the right part of your brain, the part of your brain where you can have a feeling and a thought and kind of put them together.
Yeah.
And so when we do simple things like breathing exercises, like rainbow breathing, box breathing, things like that,
That kind of regulates you.
it's a complex enough cognitive process going on that it turns back on the prefrontal cortex, which is where you can have some type of logic. Now with little kids, there's not a lot going on there yet, but understanding that that's the highest functioning part of the brain is important in really taking the time to regulate, ground, do all the mindfulness kinds of fancy things that we do that we sometimes want to dismiss and move on to the higher level stuff, but that is fundamental in having success with the other stuff.
We've talked about modeling, adults modeling healthy emotional expression, that kind of thing. What are some other ways that looks like? You had a great example of being scared when like talking about how you were scared. You talked about the Candyland game. Do you have any other examples of how we can kind of model emotions and feelings?
I think it's important here to recognize that sometimes it won't go well and you'll have a dysregulated moment that your kid will witness.
Yeah.
And having your own self-compassion about that is really important. When you direct the emotion at the kid, the negative emotion at the kid, then going back to that child and saying, hey, I didn't handle this well. This is what was going on for me. Here's what I'm going to try to do next time. I'm sorry. Then that's called a repair. And that's a beautiful thing. Research actually says that when you do a repair, it changes the memory for the kid.
Really?
Yeah. So you're recreating or changing the way that they conceptualize that moment from something that was really negative to something that's really positive.
That's comforting for me. I definitely had moments where it's like I lost my temper, raised my voice, whatever. But I did go back and be like, listen, Harrison, I didn't handle that the way I wanted to. Sorry, dude. I mean, I probably didn't hit all the boxes that you said there, but I mean, it's good to know that was doing some benefit.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I think it's a good reminder is like telling children they're allowed to feel any emotion they want, right? Like they are allowed to feel this, but it's how they choose to respond to those uncomfortable feelings. That's what's extremely important. And so when we are modeling these, like the examples that we're giving, where it's like we're not questioning, we're not limiting, we're not suppressing the emotion itself. We are recognizing that we are allowed to have these emotions. It's okay. It's how we respond to them.
For sure. And I think that's a message that I think adults need to hear more often too. We have feelings, fear, anxiety, anger, whatever, and they feel negative, but they aren't, right? Like what I've learned from you guys, it's like emotions are information, right? And so it's not having any judgment or shame around that. It's true. It's like, it's okay to feel it. It's how we choose to respond.
Well, and sometimes it's even when working with kids, like I will take a little face figurine with 2 bubbles, for example, right? With one bubble being I think and the one bubble I feel. And giving these scenarios. So for example, someone doesn't want to play with me. What is the first thing I think? That's not fair.
Yeah.
That's so unfair. What am I feeling? I'm feeling sad about this. And so then it's a question of when I feel sad, what are my options, right? Or when I'm feeling angry, what are my options? So that part is where, okay, I have my tools like rainbow breathing, right? Or I may choose to go take a cold pack and put it on the top of my head to deal with temperature imbalance that's taking place. I'm hot because I'm angry, right? That's the key thing, right? When we are teaching to identify emotions. That's why it's the first step. Then making connection to their body, the cues that it's telling us what emotion we're feeling, how this is a thought separated to the feelings, and now the behavior.
Yeah.
So if in that moment, this thought and this feeling, and it results into pinching and hitting as the behavior, then it's a reflection of what can I do differently? Can I take a pause? Can I take a break? Can I do a rainbow breathing? Can I put a cold pack on my head? Can I actually take a super sour candy and suck on that?
Oh,
because that itself can.
That's helpful. Yeah.
And don't tell any dentist I said that, but but it's true, right? Even anything with senses, right? Like we're engaging all the senses again. So it can be even like, a scratch sniffy sticker.
Okay.
In that sense,
Yeah.
right? So those things can help create the regulation and the response as an alternative to what was negative, which is yelling, screaming, pinching, punching, pushing, things like that.
Thank you so much, AJ and Nicole. This was excellent. You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counselling Centre podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Pamela Rogers, Nick Here, Louisa Campos, Manuel Montano, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to AJ Manning and Nicole Ward. Don't forget to check out the free resources we've put together to support your kids. Head to the link in the show notes. Tune in on September 2nd when we continue our conversation with Nicole and AJ. We'll talk about when to know when your child might benefit from counseling and what counseling for children looks like.
There is a lot of pressure, expectations, exposure to media and things that impact what our view of how we should be doing it or the right way. So I think when people come here, it's really for parents or caregivers, it's really important to validate how hard it is for parents and to recognize that, there's no one right way.
To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counselling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counselling Centre and Counselling Alberta provide effective counselling to anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounselling.com and counsellingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.